Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mark Hasiuk Show here on Roadkill Radio. I'm Mark Hasiuk. Immigration, a taboo subject in many precincts. As an immigrant nation, what restrictions should Canada impose on immigration, and what's best for our country and our culture? Tonight's guest offers expert analysis on immigration, particularly the economic realm. Mr. Herbert Grubel is a professor emeritus of economics at Simon Fraser University and a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute, a conservative think tank. Mr. Grubel, welcome.
Thank you.
What's the biggest problem with our immigration system?
Well, when we went to the point system to select immigrants who have a good prospect for economic success in Canada, that was in the 70s. You know, we went from letting in Europeans. We said, no, that's discriminatory. We just go on the basis of merit. We introduced the point system, which is famous around the world and imitated and envied by many. But what they did is they put a lot of emphasis on an applicant's level of education. Mm-hmm. So if somebody speaks English or French, is young and healthy, and has a university degree, then they have a very good chance of coming into Canada. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course they're accompanied by their immediate family, their spouses, and their underage children. Mm-hmm. And now it turns out that this criterion of education did not produce a very economically successful immigrants. Since the middle 80s, Statistics Canada data show that the average income of those, even after they've been here for 10 years, is still way below that of Canadians. Whereas the immigrants who used to come in the post-war years, mainly from Europe and the United States, they had, after 10 years, they typically had at least the same income as Canadians, if not higher.
Now, according to your report at the Fraser Institute, because of this, even though immigrants are here for 10 years, they're still not prospering economically. And in 2010, that fiscal burden equaled $25 billion, meaning immigrants were drawing more from our social services and from our social safety net, including our healthcare system, than they were paying in, basically, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, this is the consequence. I was just building up to the idea. You asked me what's wrong.
Yeah.
What's wrong is we're selecting the wrong immigrants. We are using the wrong criteria. So that is why, on average, these are Statistics Canada data, they pay about 54% in personal income taxes on average than the average Canadian does. Mm-hmm. Now, since in the welfare state, they do get all of the benefits that Canadians do, and in fact, because they have more children, they absorb more of our educational tax dollars than the average Canadian. So what we did is we calculated what the average immigrant with such low income pays in personal income taxes, sales taxes, corporate taxes, and so on, all the taxes that we all pay, and found that after adjustment for the fact that they have more education requirements, we come up with that the average immigrant in Canada imposes a fiscal burden of $6,000 per year. Mm-hmm. That is, every year, the average immigrant who immigrated between 1987 and 2005 imposes $6,000 a year. If you take all the people who came in, over 2 million, it comes to about $25 billion a year.
How many do we let in every year, roughly?
Roughly 25,000.
Herbert Grubel is a professor emeritus of economics at SFU and a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute. He also writes guest columns every now and then for the National Post and the Globe and Mail. Mr. Grubel, what's a family class immigrant? I just want to set some terms here, because in 2009, according to federal stats, family class immigrants made up 22% of all immigrants who entered Canada. Those who were selected by the federal government for entry into Canada based on their job skills, that was only 16%. So what's a family class immigrant?
There are two types of family classes. It's a bit confusing. You have the immediate family, and nobody really can fault the government for saying, okay, if you want to bring in an engineer to here, you can't have his spouse and his family stay at home, or take only single people. That's okay. What is not okay is that at some point in the last 20 years, we have decided we would also allow them to bring in their parents and grandparents, and eventually also siblings by sponsoring them. And by doing those kinds of things, these people do not pass the test of economic success that the principal skilled worker applicant does. And this is a very expensive kind of form of immigration, because these parents and grandparents do not have lots of education. They typically don't have skills that are needed. Their English is inadequate, and then that means they don't pay any taxes or very low taxes, but then they're automatically entitled to all the health care benefits.
Okay, let's talk about solutions then. Now, in the report I cited, your Fraser Institute report, you called for basically, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a 6-year trial period where immigrants would have to demonstrate their employability before receiving citizenship. Is that correct?
Well, that is, no, I think that's not the essence. The essence is when they first come in.
Okay.
So we take those who have a university degree, and we don't know anything about the university, and we give as much weight to a degree from some backwater university in India or China as to Harvard graduates. No.
That's no good.
Yeah, that's what the minister said the other day. It makes no sense that we give the same weight to some unknown university degree as to Harvard. So, but that's not really the issue. The real issue is that we should have the market decide who comes in, because only an employer who has to pay the salary and knows that the guy has to be productive to earn his salary, he is the best judge on who should be allowed to come into Canada. So we are saying, let the market determine who comes in, rather than point systems and bureaucrats and politicians.
Now, I can hear people right now saying, well, what if someone wants to come here and get educated to better their life and get a better job from another country, say the third world? What do we do with that person?
Well, if they come here, like many do, and pay their education, this is the equivalent of having international trade in educational services. They come here, they pay their tuition, and we have an export of a service. That's no problem. The problem is having them come here, not earning enough, especially during those years that you are suggesting they get educated or trained, and getting all the social benefits. That's the problem.
Herbert Grubel is a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute. Check out fraserinstitute.org for this report and other analysis and commentary. Mr. Grubel, all we hear all the time is that immigrants drive our economy, that we need to replenish the workforce with immigrants or we face a great crisis. Is this true?
It is a lot of false reasoning, and it is self-serving arguments by employers who would rather have someone come in at a low wage and not having to train them. They are the people who are pushing this line. Look at Japan. Japan has virtually no immigrants, and Japan is one of the most aging population in the world. What counts is that their increases and has increased at almost half the pace of the most rapidly growing per capita growth country, the United States. There is no correlation between having lots of people join the labor force and per capita income. And what our policies should be to maximize per capita income. Now, what these immigrants do, if you want to take the other side, and I'm surprised that the unions haven't caught on. When you bring in all these workers, they depress wages, the wages that the unions represent.
Right.
And they increase profits for the corporations. And I just don't understand why the unions are supporting high levels of immigration. I guess what they think is that in the future there will be more union members who pay dues so that the leaders can stay in power and have high income.
Well, that's another discussion. Now, let's move on to kind of switch gears a little bit. And for full disclosure, Mr. Grubel, you are an immigrant. You came here, I believe, in 1956 from Germany, correct?
Well, I went to the United States, got educated there, paying my own way, getting scholarships, got a PhD at Yale, taught in the United States at American leading universities for 10 years before I decided life was too short to spend it in Philadelphia, and I came to this beautiful part of the world and this great country, Canada, in 1972.
The typical immigrant story, I think.
Yeah, typical, yes. But that's not really true. I mean, the data show that the people who have come here since 87 have not got that story on average.
Well, no, most of them don't go to Ivy League schools. I was being a little
whatever
cheeky.
We hear about individuals who were great financial success, entrepreneurs, started businesses, and all that kind of a thing. You can't make policy on the basis of a few success stories. You've got to look at the averages, and that's what these statistics show.
Okay, I want to look at a couple more statistics here. Native-born Canadians, and you mentioned, you alluded to folks in this country of European ancestry. Native-born Canadians of European ancestry, like Europeans in Europe, are a dying breed due to low birth rates. According to the latest Statistics Canada report, immigrants fuel 2/3 of our population growth. Between 2001 and 2006, Canada's native-born population increased by a mere 400,000. However, during that same 5-year period, 1.2 million immigrants, mainly from Asia, Africa, and Central and South America, arrived on Canadian soil. Here's my point. If trends continue, by 2030, because of the death of the baby boom generation, the number of deaths in Canada will exceed the number of births among Canadian residents, so the only population growth factor will be immigration. So the regulations and the restrictions that you are prescribing here, they may be moot in a few years because we're not going to have any other choice but to open up the doors and let a lot more people in than we're letting in now.
Well, I totally disagree with it.
Okay, why?
Japan has already the same thing that you said we would have in 20 years or 30 years.
Uh-huh.
We already have it. Most people think that the living standard, the quality of life in Japan is much higher than anywhere else in the world. It is not necessary to have population growth in order to have a high living standard and a rising living standard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing is that one reason why, for example, we don't have enough children is because the housing costs are so high.
Yeah.
Well, people postpone marriage, postpone having children because they can't afford housing.
Right. And
how many housing units are required by the immigrants every week who are settling from abroad in the greater Vancouver area?
Yeah, but Mr. Grubel, people here in Canada aren't choosing to not have kids because of immigrants are taking housing. It's just part of our culture now. Women are out of the house. People don't want to be bothered with kids. It's a real problem. I think it's a huge problem. But I wouldn't blame it on immigrants taking homes.
No, I beg your pardon. I'm not saying they're taking homes.
Yeah.
And I'm not denying that there are all kinds of reasons on why people around the world have fewer children.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you believe that the outrageous ratio of house prices over income, which is 9, the second highest in the world, is due to the fact that every week 250 new housing units have to be built, needing land and other resources in order to accommodate the 250 families that settled in that week.
It's a factor. I'll give you that. But let's. I just want to keep on the European ancestry thing here. Since the 1980s, when immigration from Asia and the Third World increased, and European immigration began to decline, we've seen a drop in immigrant incomes. You've already established that. You guys have shown that in your reports. So should we favor immigrants from Western Europe?
I don't care. I think our immigration policy should remain colorblind. I don't care if they can persuade a Canadian employer that their pay, that they are good enough workers, well enough qualified to earn their income. Let them come in.
Yeah, but if you're drawing from a pool from, say, Western Europe, those people are going to be much more likely to acclimate and assimilate at a faster rate, obviously, because they're more likely to speak English. They'll be more familiar with the culture. Correct?
Well, there are a whole range of things. So the fact is, an immigrant consultant told me how stupid our system is. He's representing people from Switzerland who would love to live in Canada.
Yeah.
They think it's a great country. They would like to live here.
Mm-hmm.
They, however, have been educated in a very carefully designed craft programs. So they become the best mechanics, the best carpenters, and so on that you can imagine.
Okay.
But he says, I can't get them to come here because the rules say they have to have a university degree.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking somebody who has a university degree in teaching Chinese literature from some university in China over a fine mechanic trained to the finest standards from Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the minister has begun to change this. I mean, he is finding out more about what kind of universities they are and to give more emphasis to skills.
Right. And he just alluded to that a couple of weeks ago, I believe. That
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been...
That's Minister Jason Kenney.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Minister of Immigration.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, we want immigration to serve us, you and me, as taxpayers. But let us not forget that the objective of economic and immigration policy generally is to maximize the average income that the Canadian gets, not total income.
Right.
And when you add people to the labor force, yes, you increase income.
Yeah.
And that's what so many people confuse with income per capita.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to live in India or in China,
Mm-hmm.
they have much higher national income than we do.
Mm-hmm.
But of course their per capita income is so much lower.
Yeah.
So that's what we're driving at, is to make policies that serve the interest of Canadians.
But you can't separate the economy from the culture. And I want to look at very briefly what's going on in Europe. You saw this recent election in France. Much of it was about austerity, but what's her name, Marine Le Pen, got a huge chunk of the vote because people in France are very worried about the erosion of their culture. And it's something that no one in Canada wants to talk about. The three of the basic tenets of culture, I should say, are race, language, and religion. Should, in your view, Mr. Grubel, our federal government consider the cultural makeup of immigrants and their ability to assimilate at this point in our history? I
have stayed away from these issues. There are other people at the Fraser Institute and scholars who are specializing in this. If I get caught up into my analysis of the economic effects of immigration lose credibility, and the attention will be diverted away from that. There are enough people who should have them on the program sometime to deal with this issue.
I think I'll do that.
But let me just say that Le Pen, on the one hand, were all the anti-immigrants, but the President Sarkozy, who was initiating policies to deal with the Islam group, well, they all voted against him.
Right.
So, it turns out that I just read an article by Mark Stein that in Netherlands, for example, it's now really the Islam, the Muslim population which is electing the political leaders.
Right. Because they're very motivated and they can organize properly.
And they do. And of course, there are lots of people in the Netherlands who believe to be a tolerant society, we should be completely colorblind and completely tolerant of all religions, whatever they argue.
Yeah. As do I. But in crafting future immigration policy, I think there need to be we need to be able to discuss these things without whipping out the race card and having people being branded as bigots. That's one of my great hopes. But I know that's not your focus of expertise. Herbert Grubel, thank you very much for coming on the program this evening. It was very educational.
Thank you, Mark, for having me, and let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Herbert Grubel, a professor emeritus at the University of Simon Fraser University and a fellow at the Fraser Institute, a conservative think tank here in BC. Very interesting discussion. This issue is going to heat up. We mentioned that... shut that off. Mentioned that the federal immigration minister, Jason Kenney, is looking at reforming our immigration system. So this is going to be in the news for at least the next couple of years, and it's a hot topic for sure. I'm Mark Hasiuk. You've been watching The Mark Hasiuk Show. Thanks so much for joining us. Good luck. God bless. We'll see you next time.